Welcome to this section on accessibility. This lecture is on accessible colors. Introduction. Although adding color to a page can make it more visually appealing, using the wrong color combination or relying solely on color to convey information can end up making things more difficult to perceive and understand for some users. This doesn't mean you have to limit yourself when choosing color schemes for a website, but it does mean you have to take extra care when actually using those colors. What does this mean? So let's go ahead. Learning outcomes. Understand what a contrast ratio is. Know how to check contrast ratios. Understand why color alone should not be used to convey information. Color contrast. So this is yellow on white, this is yellow on blue, and gray on white. Can you easily read the text in all three? Yes, three examples above the image above. So yes, three, because most people would only see two. They might totally miss this middle line or maybe the top line if they have a low contrast. If you can't, then that's because the contrast ratio is too low. If you can, then consider me jealous of your eyesight, but you still need to provide an easily perceivable website for visually impaired users. A contrast ratio is the difference in brightness between two colors expressed as a ratio. White text on a white background would have the lowest ratio, that is 1:1. It would be totally invisible, you can't read the text. While black text on a white background would have the highest, which is 21:1. Contrast ratios refer to both normal text as well as images of text. Like this one is not text but an image. As you can see, this is an image of text. There are two different conformance levels for contrast ratios, both of which have rules for normal text and large text. Normal text is defined as text with a font size that's less than 18 points / 24 pixel or less than 14 points / 18.66 pixel for bold text. And large text is defined as text with a font size that is at least 18 points or 24 pixel or at least 14.866 pixels for bold text. So this is the boundary. There is less and this one is more. Level AA minimum requires a contrast ratio of at least 4.5:1 for normal text and 3:1 for large text. Level AAA enhanced requires a contrast ratio of at least 7:1 for normal text and 4.5:1 for large text. Both conformance levels have exceptions that don't need to follow the contrast ratio rules. What are these exceptions? Incidental text, such as text that just happens to be within an image that has other significance visual context or text that is purely decorative. So let me some space between this UL. If I have this UL, I will put some space is between those. So UL will have a margin bottom between the UL and the next paragraph. Margin bottom, margin T top R B. So this is margin bottom on the UL part. Or let me put a min height. Min height 50, 100 page. So this will just separate from the previous. Next paragraph. Okay, now this looks good. Text that is part of an inactive or disabled user interface component, such as a button, that is disabled and has a lowered opacity. Text that is part of a logo or brand name. So these are the exceptions that are allowed. At this point, you might be thinking 18.66 pixels, 4.5:1. How the heck am I supposed to remember those numbers? Wait, how am I supposed to even calculate these ratios in the first place? Luckily for you, you don't have to. WebM Contrast Checker is a fantastic tool for checking contrast ratios. For example, the hex code of the foreground and background colors, and it calculates what conformance levels, if any, the contrast ratio passes. The page also has a link for a link contrast checker, which goes over what the contrast ratio should be if a text link is an underline. Let's have a look at it. Can we blow this up? Yeah, blow this up. 8.5:9. So let's color foreground color and background color. So if I have it's green, it's very low. Green is bad. Blue is quite high. Purple is similar. Purple or even this purple. I think this will be high. 8.24. This is pass. This passes both the guidelines. So you can test all colors and if you change the background color to black, I think that will go low and it will fail both the. So the background and the foreground combination. Nice. You can also check the contrast ratio of the text within an element using the browser's dev tools. In Chrome, you would click the element picker tool in the elements tab, then hover over an element of the page. So I can do that right here. I have this, hover over the element. If you select an element with the text in the elements tab, you can click on the color picker tool of the color property. Color property under styles to view the contrast ratio as well. So if you have under the contrast under the styles, so on the P, the color is, if I put a color of black, so then what is the contrast ratio on this one? Black on white. You can click on the color picker tool under styles for the color property. No contrast information available. So instead, if I select some other color, no contrast information available. So here you should get the contrast information. Conveying information. Now that you know to take the contrast ratio into account when adding color for text and backgrounds, let's see if you can tell which of the buttons in the image below is red. So all of these are grayscale. None of them appear as red. The answer, by the way, is button 4. The image above is simulated achromatopsia, which is also known as total color blindness. So you can see no color. This illustrates a key point when using color. You shouldn't use color alone to convey information. There may be exceptions where it's necessary to only use color, but generally you want to follow this rule. Let's look at another example. Let's say you want to create a form that has an instruction stating that required fields are indicated by red text. If a user is colorblind or otherwise has difficulty telling some colors apart, having to rely solely on the color of this text can make it difficult or even impossible to perceive or operate the form. Instead of using only color, your form should indicate all required fields with red text and an asterisk. So the asterisk will be visible to your colorblind users. So instead of cross, all this in red, there is an asterisk, all fields required are in red with an. So even if this color goes off, the text would mean that this is the field that has to be filled in. The asterisk makes the difference. Knowledge check. What is the contrast ratio? So now you know what is the contrast ratio, how it is calculated. What are the two ways you can check a contrast ratio using your dev tools? So one inbuilt in your dev tools, one is outside, you can see. What should you avoid when conveying information to users? So these are the things that you should keep in mind. Additional resources, a complete guide to dark mode on the web from CSS Tricks. This is CSS Tricks, which is a very important, which is a very well-known site in CSS. It's an authoritative website on CSS. CSS Tricks can be a great starting point for implementing a dark theme for your website. It covers different ways you can toggle a theme, how to take into account a user's preferred theme on their OS, and even saving a user's preference. Although providing a light and dark theme can be a great accessibility feature for users, not just an aesthetic preference, it can take a lot of work to implement, hence why it is considered an additional resource. With that, we'll come to the end of this lecture. See you on the next one.